All right, guys, so we're back. This is part 2 of my Genesis collection. We did the first half of the alphabet, the other first video. So let's pick up where we left off. So here I've got the Lethal Enforcer games. Now these games, they came in a bigger box because they came with a gun. At least the first one came with a gun. And I've got the Just Fire lying around somewhere. Lemmings, kind of a puzzle game. You know, you've got to set them on the right path and kind of, you know, choose the terrain they're going to follow. Don't put too much time into that. This is another Koei game that is strategy. I don't want to use the term RPG, but more like plan out your exchanges, plan out your attacks. I really want to start playing this one when I know I have a large chunk of time ahead of me. Lion King, Disney's Lion King, so I guess you could put this by the D's. Oh no, actually it's not Disney's Lion King, it just says Lion King. Not as good, not as fun as Aladdin, because it's just there's some really cheap death areas in this game, and it kind of make it a little frustrating. Lost Vikings, so John Madden Football, right, the cardboard, the standard box. What's interesting was, a couple years ago, I found the clamshell version. Now this is very rare because I've never ever seen one, and most people don't know that it exists. This was apparently brought over from they were leftovers from Sega of Europe, I think, and they just didn't sell well there because Sega of Europe they didn't do cardboard boxes, so EA had to make plastic clamshells for over there. And they didn't just sell tremendously well. There's not a lot of them around. At least most people don't know them. They can't find them on eBay. You can't find them on price charting. So I'm curious to see what happens to this over time. But this Madden 92 was the game that I spent the most time playing in high school. Me and my friends, right? We would just this would be like a Friday night. This, you know, a pizza and a 6-pack of Mountain Dew would be what we would do for so long. Just you know, the simple, tight gameplay, more plays, you know, not too drastically different than the original, just classic all around. 93 was also good. They added so much more to this. I think they did no huddle offense, and the Bears, who I usually use most of the time, weren't as good in this game, so I kind of actually favor 92 over 93. And, you know, here are the rest of those. Nothing much to say about those. We got here Mega Drive Shooter, Master of Weapon. It's a mediocre Mega Drive shooter. Marvel Land, an early Namco arcade port. Namco was a decent supporter, third-party publisher for the Genesis, so they brought over a bunch of stuff. It's kind of hard. Maybe it's just me, but like a game this simple, you'd think it'd be easier, but for some reason I just can't get very far in it. Mazen Saga. I love this game. This is a beat 'em up in the vein of Golden Axe, but for the boss battles, you zoom in and it becomes a fighter, a one-on-one fighter, and so there's moves and, you know, ways to dodge and block attacks. So there's a lot of variety in the gameplay here, and also just, you know, lots going on. The background enemies, giant hands, feet coming into the foreground. Not very well known. Great game. Mega Bomberman. This is the equivalent of Bomberman 93 on the PC Engine. This is the new release, the Retrobit re-release of the Wily Wars. Wily Wars is Mega Man's 1, 2, and 3 on the NES, but upgraded in 16-bit style for the Genesis. It's a fine port. It's a fine game. You can save the game where your progress, but I gotta say, growing up, the muscle memory on the NES is where, you know, is what I can relate to. If something feels slightly different enough to make this kind of make me just want to play the NES versions. The music also, the sound chip for the Genesis and NES, while very different, There are a lot of examples where I do like the sound chip for the Genesis, but not for this. I like the NES game better. Mega Turrican, this is a fantastic run and gun. Kind of pricey these days. The Turrican series, this is where I felt the Turrican series started getting good. There were other Turrican games prior to this, and it felt very unpolished. Some wonky hit detection on the earlier ones. Cheap level design before. This I feel like they kind of, you know, honed in. They fine-tuned it. Mega Swiv. This is a two-player game where you drive as you can operate a chopper or a jeep, in two-player co-op. What was this called? This is called Firepower 2000 on the SNES. It's okay. It's actually not as fun as the SNES version. Mercs, good arcade port, right, for Capcom. So this was, again, one of those games where Capcom had licensed for the game to be released as a first party for the Genesis. The first person, so they took out the multiplayer, unfortunately, but they did add more depth. Kind of like RPG light elements where you could level up. So that's cool. Mickey Mania. This game has a lot of great graphical and just really good graphics for this game. Just, you know, it takes you through the different eras of Mickey and just a lot of fun. Good game for beginners. Follows in the vein of Castle of Illusion. Moonwalker. So what a bizarre game. It's a side-scroller platformer. You, I guess, attack people with magic, and then if you build up your magic bar, you can make everybody dance to a Michael Jackson song, and they die. Ironically, you're rescuing children. You know, for those of you who grew up in the 80s and 90s and remember the allegations against Michael Jackson, that's kind of funny. Micro Machines. So, the Codemasters games, I don't think this was officially licensed. But anyways, this is an overhead view racing game, multiplayer. Since Micro Machines was a toy line where the cars are very small, and hence the gimmick is you're driving around household environments, driving around pencils, books, that kind of stuff, cereal. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. There's nothing else quite like it on the Genesis. I guess you could say there's RC Pro-Am, but this is it's its own flavor, and there were a couple of them. It's Micro Machines 1, Micro Machines 2. I don't think that the other versions were released here. These were popular in Europe. Midnight Resistance, Run and Gun 2D. Well, they're all 2D. Run and gun style. It's kind of slower, methodical, based on the arcade game. You collect keys, and with these keys you can unlock better weapons. Your jump is a little floaty, but that also means you can kind of navigate where you land. So it's a fun game. Mortal Kombat's, yeah. This is my prize of my collection, at least in my eyes. This game I got for, what was it? 2011. I got it. I walked into a game store in Woodstock, Illinois, called TNT Games, and this was behind the case, and they were asking $65 for it. Now, back then, $65 for this was still like half of what they should have. I think they priced it as what the loose cart was going for at the time, so I pounced on this right away, and it's complete. My favorite. This is probably my favorite game besides Thunder Force 3 on the Genesis. So I've got a little box protector. Mutant League. Again, another case where the box is, why is it thicker? Just why? Why did they do that? It's kind of annoying. Miss Pac-Man. This is a respectable port of Miss Pac-Man. It's a lot of fun. My wife played this a lot back when we first moved into the house. She mastered the game. She beat it like upside down, left side, right. And so she got really into it. This is a reproduction, obviously, of Monster World 4. And this is the translated version, so you know what's going on in English. And it's a really fun game. It's a shame it didn't come out here. I'm surprised Working Designs didn't pounce on this and, you know, try to publish this. But it's since been re-released several times on modern platforms like the Switch, PS4, so there's that, I guess. Mystic Defender early magic spellcasting game. This is actually the sequel to a Master System game called Spellcaster, where you can hold down and charge up your energy, your magic, and shoot off like a bigger blast of magic, or just like fire and rapid fire for like the popcorn enemies. It's tricky platforming, so you know, not really talked about, but very good. Mystical Fighter. This kind of looks like a generic game, and the kabuki theme might throw a lot of people off, but this is a lot of fun too. It's a beat 'em up 2-player, and the funny thing about this game is that you can spin people around. It's really kind of comical, and then when you let go of the button, they go shooting across the screen at like the same speed like you'd fire a gun at. Yeah, so if you want something different, check this one out. All right, so NBA Jam, NBA. Oops, come back. Sorry about that. New Zealand Story, Mega Drive game. Cute platformer where your little chick, he jumps around, and you know, not quite sure what the story is. I don't really read it, but it's a fun game. You know, although it's kind of hard, it's tricky. So you'd think this would be a good game to like show a kid, but they probably wouldn't get very far because of how demanding the platforming, and your hitbox is humongous. NHL. So Nobunaga's Ambition, again, another Koei strategy game. Right? I'm just, now whenever I'm seeing these, I'm just snapping them up because these games, I think, will have, they'll age well and they'll play well when you're older. And yeah. Now this game is an unofficial release. This is a homebrew shooter that is ridiculously insane. It's like a caravan shooter where it's just timed to game 2 minutes. How many points can you score in 2 minutes? Or how long can you last, rather? And I can't last very long because I can't believe some of the stuff it's making the Genesis pull off here. It reminds me of Rekka on the NES, which was that other caravan shooter that's also known to be pushing the limits of the system. So if you are a shooter fan, you should definitely look at this one and find a way to play it. Operation Europe, another Koei strategy game. This is time and space on the European theater of the World War II. Out of This World, computer port, methodical, a lot of cinematics. Genesis Outrun port, which is really good. It's I know they released it for Master System too, but this one is definitely much better than that. It's not arcade perfect, but you know, for the time, it was about the best one you could get. I don't really care for the other Outrun games too much. Paperboy, you know, I could take it or leave it. Pulse Man, this is a repro, obviously not released in the States, but it almost seems like it would be a Mega Man game, but it doesn't really quite play like that. I want to get back and play some more of this, though, to be honest. Pacific Theater of Operations, so also a Koei strategy game, this time based on the Pacific Theater of World War II, right? You know, these games, they all have a similar style of play. They're all strategy games and resource management, right? Decisions, allocating. Panorama Cotton. So this one here, again, a Mega Drive shooter. This one was kind of a Space Harrier style fly into the screen, which is not actually I don't really like that style of play that much, but it was a shooter and I needed it to complete, and by the time I got around to finally picking it up, it was just one of like the last 2 games that I needed for my Genesis shooter collection. It got pricey, so I have it, and you know, I didn't pay straight up for it, though I did a lot of trades to get there, so it wasn't that bad. I think this basically what I'm holding here is the sum of my N64 collection that I just never ever played, and so the return on, you know, those $5 cards for NES was huge, you know, years later. So that's how I was able to buy this. Populous, Phantasy Star 2. This is probably the first proper RPG that I've ever played. And I remember my first job I worked at McDonald's, and I had my first check. I went to the Warehouse Club, and I bought this, and it came bundled with a hint book, which I have over there on that bookshelf. And it came with a map. And the game, the graphics was so good, the music was so good. It was a little grindy, you know, but you know, as a kid in high school, you didn't mind because you had the time, right, to spend just kind of grinding away during the summer. And very mature theme for as far as the storyline. So kind of, you know, it hits you, right, and it's memorable. Phantasy Star 3, haven't played. Phantasy Star 4, haven't played yet. I'm going to get around to those one day. Philios is like a Greek mythology-inspired shooter, right? So where you fly on the horse and you're kind of shooting bolts of lightning or something from your sword and, you know, kind of destroy everybody and rescue the girl. Generic story plot, but different approach to a shooter, so it's fun. Pitfall has some good animation. I would say that this animation rivals that of Disney's Aladdin. You know, movements, the way you sway off of branches, just kind of how you duck and dodge and run. I found it's actually pretty impressive, even if the story is based off of the really old Atari 2600 game. Punisher, another pricey one. This one's beat 'em up, you know, in the style of Streets of Rage. You can play 1 or 2 player co-op with Nick Fury as the player 2. So for those of you who are, it's a little grittier, right? Because, you know, the weapon choices, there's some guns in here and grenades and whatnot. So late release, hence the rarity. They just didn't print a lot of them. Quackshot. Quackshot is a great game. Another Disney platformer, great graphics. This time you're Donald, and you have to, when you get certain places in the stage and you can't progress, you can call up your plane flying buddy to come take you back, and then you can go explore something else. You might need something else from a different stage, and you can come back and finish the stage you were on at first time. So very kind of interesting. I don't want to say Metroidvania, but you know, there's elements of that. Raiden. So I have 2 copies of Raiden because they released it twice. So the first kind is the whole early 90s neon, you know, crazy ass colors, airbrush. And then they re-released it to give it more of a mature theme. It's the same exact game. The cartridge is the exact same. The manual is the same. But they maybe felt like the neon colors, the Mountain Dew look wasn't helping it sell. This one is kind of hard to find. They definitely didn't print a lot of these. Rambo 3. This is a fun overhead shooter. Very early. So you run around. Your primary weapon is a knife, but you have a machine gun too, which fires in bursts. You can pick up bombs. You need bombs to destroy certain targets. And when you need more munitions, you usually get them if you go to hand-to-hand combat with the troops and stab them instead of shooting them. Usually when you shoot them, you don't get anything, but like if you need more arrows, you know. And another gimmick is to your explosive arrows. A lot of the boss fights are you facing off with a tank or a chopper or something, shooting your explosive arrows, as featured in the film. So, great game. Love it. Ranger X is a heralded side-scroller. Some people call it a shooter. It's more like a run and gun in my eyes. And you have this pod that, like, when you turn into a mech and float above, it just kind of travels around the ground, or you can combine with it and just drive it around. It definitely uses all 6 buttons on the 6-button controller. There's a learning curve to this. It's kind of hard at first to navigate and figure out and coordinate everything that you have to do. But once you do have it figured out, it's pretty rewarding. This Rastan Saga 2 is a disappointing game. I don't know. expected more from it. Red Zone. This game has lots of crazy cinematic cutscenes. Like, it begins with this opening scene, this animation, which is really impressive for the Genesis. There's some overhead flying helicopter scenes, and then there's you get on foot and run around, and all the while you're running around this deep basement, you see the walls scale and move and rotate. It's definitely a system pusher. The collision detection is weird, and the physics of flying the chopper is weird, so that kind of holds it back a little bit. Ristar, it's okay, I guess. Road Blasters is an okay port. Road Rasher, people love Road Rash. I'm with Chris of Classic Gaming Quarterly, where I think these games are overrated. The novelty is that you can race and you can hit people and knock them off their bikes. You know, in each race you earn money, and then eventually you earn better bikes, faster bikes. You can win bigger races, and you know, that kind of thing wasn't done at the time. It was really gritty, but I don't, you know, I kind of felt like it got old after a while, like pretty quickly. I couldn't stick with it. RoboCop versus Terminator. Very bloody, very Genesis does what Nintendo type game, where, you know, you're surprisingly agile and nimble for essentially like a 1-ton robotic cyborg. You can hang and walk, you know, you just, the rate at which you move is faster than some ninjas in some games. It's kind of crazy. But still, tons of fun, great graphics. This is a must-have if you are a fan of either RoboCop or the Terminator or both, and you have a Genesis. All right. RoboCop 3, not as good. This is just a cash-in on that crappy movie, you know, which they never should have made. Rocket Knight Adventures used to be a hidden gem, right? But I think everybody knows about this now. Konami platformer, very unique. You have a tail, and you can hang from your tail, but you're also a knight, and so you have a rocket, which you can if you hold down the charge button, you can shoot you up into the air and kind of traverse large distances with it. The Rolling Thunder games, run and guns, play just like, you know, like Shinobi, where you can jump from levels top to bottom, and you can duck and shoot, and I like these kinds of games. I think they're kind of fun, both 1 and 2, and even the NES, the first one on the NES, is pretty good too. Romance of the Three Kingdoms, another more Koei strategy historical warfare games, right? So I think I might even have all of them. I think I have all the Koei games, except for Aerobiz. Here's Sagia, which is, I mentioned in the previous video, this is known as Darius 2. And it's a good one. It's a good one. It's balanced. I'd say the difficulty is just right. Not easy to find. Samurai Showdown, a port from the Neo Geo games, Saturday Night Slam Master. So this is a great beat 'em up. I know it looks like it's a wrestling game, but it doesn't play like a wrestling game. It plays like a final fight. It's primarily just like melee moves and punches and kicks and throws and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun, which I don't really care too much for wrestling games, because the move memorization and like the whole strategy of wrestling, it's kind of lost on me. But this game is more up my alley. Shadow Blasters, a rare early game. Terrible box art. This box art alone probably explains why it didn't sell. Like, look at that guy. Come on, what were they thinking? But you know, it's actually not too bad. It's an average platformer, and you know, early in the Genesis days, they needed as many titles as they can get. Shadowrun, I recently acquired this. Have not played it, but I keep hearing great things about it. Same thing with the Shining series. I know these are kind of RPGs, but they're also strategy games. I think it's like hex strategy games, I think, where, you know, you move your guy around a hexagon grid. Or is that the other game? Maybe it's the other game. I'll get into those eventually at some point. Shining Force 2, I don't have the cardboard box for, so hence the repro case. Now, Shinobi, these games, the first Genesis game that I've ever played was this one, Revenge of Shinobi. This is what introduced me to the Genesis. And I just could not believe the graphics, the music, the action, the ninja magic. This sold me, and it just made me pine for a Genesis the minute I saw this. And, you know, my NES, I might have even traded it in, I think, just to get money for the Genesis and this game. But this is the standard in my eyes. And when people say the Genesis does not do great music, like its music generator is, for a lot of games, yes, that Gems generator, I agree, but this game is the exception. This is Yuzo Koshiro, and he even got his name on the title screen. Now, there are several revisions of this because this game did include, you know, unlicensed characters like Batman, Spider-Man, the Terminator, Godzilla. In the US, this is revision, I believe it's 01 was the earliest one that was released, and it has most of those bosses unofficially, but it doesn't have Rambo. Like the Rambo character has been turned into a bald guy in stage 2. So I went out and I bought the original, this is the same game. In Japan it was called Super Shinobi, and this does include the Rambo lookalike and all of the other cameos. So, I love the game so much, I had to have it twice. The other games in the series are also excellent. Shadow Dancer, very fun game, very arcade-like. So if you remember the original Shinobi, the action was quick and, you know, one-hit kills, yes, but, you know, very satisfying, quick attacks, close melee attacks. It still has the ninja magic, the throwing stars sequence as bonus stages. So this game gets overlooked a lot. And some people complain it's too hard because it's got no life bar. But I don't know if they know the original Shinobi game did not have a life bar. Shinobi 3, which is really more like the sequel to Revenge of Shinobi. So this plays more like Revenge of Shinobi. It's a little faster. They did a lot of refinements. He's more agile. They added the graphics have been improved. The music is not done by Yuzo Koshiro, but it's still good music. But, you know, in my eyes, Yuzo Koshiro was the king of the Genesis as far as music composition. All right. Puzzle game. Slap Fight. This is a really rare Mega Drive shooter. Slap Fight was a very early Toaplan game. And, you know, it got such a cult status in Japan when they released it into the Mega Drive. But they didn't release it here because I don't think the Slap Fight Arcade ever came out here in the States. So, but this also has an alternate soundtrack by Yuzo Koshiro as well. The mechanic of collecting stars, and then it moves your progress bar, and so you can choose the different weapons based on how many stars you have. It's kind of Gradius-like in that regard, except that you don't stack your power-ups. You just choose a different one, right? So you can only have one power-up at a time, and so the trick is to pick the right one based on the scenario you're about to face. And you would know that after playing it for a while. Soul Feast is a shooter. This was also released on Sega CD, but they changed the name to this is Soul Dees. On the Sega CD, it's called Soul Feast. Same game, but, you know, the CD one has CD quality music, which I like chiptunes, so I actually prefer cart versions like this instead. As far as gameplay, you know, it's okay. You've got your gun ports can be angled as to wide or narrow if you want to concentrate your fire, or if you want to kind of fan them out like a spread. So that's interesting. This is a repro of Snow Bros. Didn't come out here, obviously. Sonics. Not much more to say about that. Space Harrier 2 was disappointing. I just wish they released this original Space Harrier. I would have bought the original Space Harrier, but I get what happened, you know. The Genesis, they don't want to look like they're repeating 8-bit, the stuff they did on the 8-bit, so that's why they had to call it Space Harrier 2, but Space Harrier 1 is a better game. Space Invaders. This is a repro of a game that of a shooter that only came out in Korea. It was called Space Turtle Ship. It's not very good, but I needed it to complete my shooter collection, so I couldn't find the original, so I just ended up buying this. And actually, it's very rare will you find a repro maker wanting to make this, because there's like no demand for it. Sparkster is the sequel to Rocket Knight Adventures, so it's a little different, but it has mostly the same mechanics. And then we have a glut of Spider-Man games to to be honest, I don't think they did the swinging mechanic very well on a Genesis. So I think the better Spider-Man games are the ones that are more like beat 'em ups. So they released 2 of these these Spider-Man and Venom games on the Genesis. This first one, Maximum Carnage, this is a respectable beat 'em up, but the second one is better because the second one you can actually have 2-player co-op. You can actually play 2 people at the same time, which is what I think the way beat 'em up should be played. I mean, what fun is a beat 'em up when you play by yourself? Splatterhouses. So the second Splatterhouse plays more like the original arcade. You know, it's left to right, just like the TurboGrafx, basically like another version of it. But Splatterhouse 3 is a beat 'em up, and so you walk in more like there's a plane that you can walk up and down, left and right, but it's still 2D. And there's a timer, and that's the kicker. If you don't get to the boss and finish the boss by the time the timer ends, you know, your girlfriend dies, I guess. So you get a bad ending. Sports talk, Star Trek. Let's come down here. Steel Empire, a very, very cool stylistic game. This is a steampunk-inspired shooter. You can fly as a biplane or as a blimp. And the music is great. The color tones is just very interesting. Just very unique, fun shooter. Very highly recommended. Street Fighter, Streets of Rage. You know, Streets of Rage is one of the premier franchises for the Genesis, along with, you know, the Shinobi series, along with the Sonics, you know, Golden Axes. So this game was definitely something that propelled the Genesis up into being competitive, and part, you know, when Sega grabbed that 51% market share back in, what was it, 93 or 92 or something like that. This is one of the reasons why, you know, 2-player beat 'em up, lots of weapons, music by Yuzo Koshiro, and you know, at a time you think, oh, it doesn't get any better than this, but it did, because Streets of Rage 2 came out and was so much better. You know, the combo system was deeper, more moves. The music just as good, also by Yuzo Koshiro. You know, the boss fight, just such a well-rounded brawler. Unfortunately, you know, what goes up must come down. So Streets of Rage 3, as far as the brawling action, was still on par. It was still good. I think this is when Yuzo Koshiro kind of shit the bed, and he got a little over cocky with his music. And so, if I remember correctly, it's a random music pattern generator that he programmed. It's a techno style. It just literally sounds like crazy loops of beeps and boops and, I don't know, electronica. It's kind of disjointed, and it's kind of abrasive, to be honest. And this version was actually a little too hard. So what's better is this is a repro, a Japanese repro of the Mega Drive game. So Bare Knuckle, the series was called Bare Knuckle in Japan, and the Japanese version of this game, they didn't change Axel's shirt color to yellow and black, so it stayed true to what the character looked like before, which I prefer. And it's just more balanced. You know, and there's the characters who were kind of offensive were not censored in this version because Japan don't give a fuck. It's a much preferable way to play the Japanese version, and this version's translated too, so you know, you don't have to worry about the language barrier. This is the actual Bare Knuckle 3, the Japanese like actual Mega Drive cart. So, whereas this one is a repro of that's been translated. So that's why I have those. I really never played the American Streets of Rage 3. Strider, seminal game, impressive port. Subterranea, a gravity-based, physics-based shooter where you have a ship and you have to kind of control your jet fuel, your propulsion Very annoying because you're just crashing into everything. And every time you crash, you lose energy. And by the time you even reach a boss, you're basically dead from all the crashes that you'd had with the environment. Maybe, you know, if you turned on like Invincible, you can get through the stages. I can't get anywhere in this game. I just cannot. I'm too impatient for the nuance of the control of the craft in this game. But, you know, I guess some people like it. Here's the Strike series, EA. They made a crap ton of these. Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, Urban Strike. You know, they're slower, methodical. It's not so much about shooting them up as planning your attacks, managing your resources, knowing when to refuel, when to pick up armor, stuff like that. Sunset Riders is a great arcade game port. They also released this for the SNES. The Genesis port is a little more randy, right? You actually can interact with the brothel workers, and whereas I don't think they exist in the SNES version. And yeah, it's fast, fluid gameplay. Super Fantasy Zone. This is a European Mega Drive import. Right. Hang on, Superman. This is a beat 'em up. This is actually not as fun as the Death and Return of Superman. Super Monaco is racing games. I respect people who can play racing games, but I cannot play racing games. I just cannot wrap my head around exactly how to make the turns without crashing and whatnot. Super Thunderblade, early arcade port. Just trying to do on the Genesis that cannot be done on the Genesis, and thus of kind of a rough outing. So could have been done better maybe if they held off a generation. Target Earth. This game is a lot of fun, and it's hard, but it's not impossible. You have to learn it. You have to understand what you can hit, what you can't, what you should do, what to focus on. It was called Assault Suits Vulcan, I think, in Japan, and there's a lot of variety of gameplay. Like you start off on the ground, but then there's scenes where you're controlling yourself in space with zero gravity, so you got to be careful because you'll float in one direction, then to like go in the other direction, you have to propel yourself in the other direction. So just terrible box cover. I don't know why they changed the original design. The original design, box design was really cool. This looks like a Battlestar Galactica ripoff. Anyways, Task Force Harrier, little known shooter. It's run of the mill. Nothing crazy about it. Some Disney properties, Tecmo Bowl, Hyperstone Heist. One of the best beat 'em ups on the Genesis. I know this was released around the same time as Turtles in Time, so a lot of people call it a Turtles in Time ripoff, but they actually did change the stage layouts. There's fewer stages, but they're longer, and they added material to make those stages longer. The one thing that's notable between the two is that when you don't throw enemies towards the screen, the Genesis did not have that ability like the SNES did. But other than that, this game is just as fun as the SNES version. And of course, fighting game craze. They had to release a fighting game. The Terminator, it had potential, just too hard at the onset. It wasn't really balanced. The only way you could kill anything is by throwing grenades. Your main gun is basically useless, and that's just made it frustrating. Thunderbolt 2 is an unreleased shooter, hence the repro cart. It's okay, but I wanted to have all the shooters in physical form, so I sprung for this repro of it. Thunder Fox is a game that's reminiscent of the Ninja Warriors. It's pretty rare. It's probably, the arcade game is probably based on the same arcade board, right? Because they play very, very similarly. So it's an average game. All right, Thunder Force series. Thunder Force 2 was a launch title, but Thunder Force 3 for me is where the series really starts to hit home. The music in this game rivals that of any Yuzo Koshiro soundtrack. just the graphics, you know, were very well designed. The backgrounds, taking advantage of the hardware, just so good. Might be a little bit on the easier side in as far as shooters go, in the whole pantheon of shooters, but it's a good intro game to shooters for people who are trying to get into it. So, Thunder Force 4 was not released as Thunder Force 4 in the States. Instead, they called it Lightning Force. Spelling error and all. Now, the two of these side by sides, which one would you rather pick if you saw them, you know, on a store shelf? I just, you know, Sega of America, I just don't understand. Sometimes it seems like, you know, their grandmother was making some of these marketing decisions. Anyways, the gameplay is identical. All right, Lightning Force, Thunder Force 4, just, you know, way cooler box art. Toe Jam and Earl, I know people love them. I couldn't get into them. Toki is a very interesting platformer. Toki goes ape spit. Now, if you say that fast, what do you think that they intended for you to think it sounded like? Huh? You're a monkey. You're a boy. You get turned into a monkey, and you're trying to find your girlfriend, and your primary projectile is your spit. Now, I would be scared of any monkey shooting loogies like that as well. Okay, let's finish off the collection and move up. Last row. Okay, so we've got Top Gear 2, Toy Story. Now, Toy Story was released in paper box and later on in a clamshell. I just always prefer the clamshell. So I had the paper box, but I went to a con and I saw the clamshell, so I just picked this up for like $12 and sold the paper box. Toxic Crusader, it's a crap game. Troubleshooter, otherwise known as Battle Mania, right? So this is the first game in that series, and this one it's a lot of fun. The graphic, it's just kind of a very light-hearted shooter. You're flying around on a backpack. You have a companion who, when you press the button, can shoot in the same direction as you or in the opposite direction to kind of cover your rear. True Lies, Truxton, Toe Plan shooter, right? Legendary by now. Still, in my eyes, pretty hard. Even after you've played the game many times and you familiarize yourself with it, it's just, I find it too hard to recover from after you die. And a lot of these shooters are that way too, where, you know, you get powered up. When you get powered up, things are great. But then once you die, you kind of don't, it's a slog getting up to the same level of power that you had before. And a lot of times, the stage is just so hard that you can't get anywhere anyway. So when you die, it's it. Turrican, run and gun shooter. Twin Cobra, another Toe Plan shooter. Very hard from the onset. I think they have to have the difficulty turned up to 11 right from the beginning, which is, you know, they need, I wonder if the game would have sold better if they had adjusted that better. Twinkle Tail. So Mega Drive, run and gun / shooter. You're this little princess and you shoot magic. And if you've played Pocky and Rocky, this is very much like that. It's a lot of fun. Two Crew Dudes, Data East Beat 'em Up, Ultimate Kicks. Kicks is a puzzle game where you kind of have to section off parts of the screen and you have to get a certain percentage. But you can't get hit while you're in the process of sectioning off the screen, otherwise you die. So it's an interesting premise. It's a fun game. Undeadline, another shooter that's also like on foot, so could be like a run and gun. Very difficult because while there are power-ups, the problem is the power-ups cycle, and there's actually some that are bad for you. There's some that like will reduce your health or reduce your speed, and it's kind of annoying because you think you're getting something good, and next thing you know, you're like weaker. So in that regard, that's kind of a pain. That was a poor design choice. But anyways, Universal Soldier. This box is just kind of all over the place. It's got a magnetic sticker, price stickers all over the place. Universal Soldier, This game was originally intended to be Turrican 2, but then the company got the license for Universal Soldier, and they just kind of slapped the label on there. I don't know how much they changed. Maybe they changed the sprite a little bit. This game has problems. Collision detection is a mess, and the worst enemy in this game are the bees, right? So you're this badass soldier, right? But you're just getting stung to death by these giant bees, and then basically they sap all your energy away. So that's my complaint with this game. So I wanted to like it, but it was hard to. Vapor Trail is a shooter, and it's pretty respectable. The whole, you power up, and when you get your power meter filled up, you can buzz around the screen like this invincible bullet just flying around. And you can use that to like get out of trouble, get out of tight spots. So pretty good music overall too. It's a fun game. Valis 1, Valis 2, the whole schoolgirl turned, Amazon platformer, hack and slash platformer, like Legendary Axe, but a little faster, more agile. All right, they made a couple of these. I have 1 and 3. The second one was called Sid of Valis, and it sucked because it was a super deformed, chibi-looking character design. I don't really care for that. The Vector Man's Viewpoint is the port of the Neo Geo shooter. Veritex, a little known shooter, but pretty fast paced and fun. Virtual racing kart, volleyball. Water Margin is an unreleased brawler, and it's a hack and slash, kind of like Golden Axe. It's kind of harder. You have to be more methodical because the enemies have very unique programming. So you gotta, each one attacks a different way, and you can't just run straight in hacking and everything. There's little ways in which, that will get you into trouble. So it's fun. Whip Rush, another very early shooter. Whenever I have the choice of playing these early shooters, I tend to pick Arrow Flash. But I should give this one more time. Wings of War. So mythological themed shooter, which has very kind of grotesque large bosses, which make the game, I think, interesting and a lot of fun, right? Because the enemy design is very well done. And there's there's kind of like screen rotation and shaking and angling, which gives it a little bit of a twist. Wolverine, generic hero platformer. Wonder Boy, this is a good game. I'm not crazy about the Wonder Boy games. Wrestle War. This was a game that was supposed to come out for the Genesis early, like in '91, but it never did. But it's a very fun arcade-like wrestling. I know I mentioned I didn't like wrestling games before, but the style this way, it's done a lot like the game called Map Mania, which is an arcade game that I liked a lot as a kid. And this one was pretty cheap too. All right, and I'm getting towards the end. Xeno Crisis was a recent release by the Bitmap Bureau, and this game is just awesome. It's like Smash TV fused with aliens, and you have to clear all the aliens in a room before you can progress to another room, rescuing hostages all around. So it's so fun. You need a 6-button controller because the firing, the buttons are north, south, east, west. So you'd be using the X, Y, A, B buttons. And then you can throw grenades, you can roll out of trouble. The music's great, and they just jammed a lot. And obviously this is a recent release, so the hardware for the Genesis has been well documented, so they knew what they were doing. Zero Wing. So Zero Wing, this is a Toaplan horizontal shooter. It's only one of two horizontal shooters by Toaplan. The first one was Hellfire, and this is, that whole all your base belongs to us. This is the Japanese Mega Drive version, so obviously you don't see that written in English. That's the European release where that meme came from. But this is the original game. And so it's actually, it's still a good game. Zombies Ain't My Neighbors, Zoom, and we end with some terrible shooters. So that is my Genesis / Mega Drive collection. So I hope you maybe enjoyed or learned something from those. Yeah, I'm not really shooting for a complete set. There's just some games that I do not care to buy and have no need for. I just wanted to buy the games that were interesting to me, that meant something to me, or that I felt like I wanted to play. So, thanks for watching.